falling in love with fictional characters is completely normal. Well, it is if you love stories. We get deeply connected to these characters, and as creators of story, we really like our readers to feel the same way about the characters we write. I've got 2 quick tips that you can apply today to show you exactly how to make your characters memorable and exciting, especially those side ones. Let me show you how. Let's talk characterization. This is the term we use to use descriptive words and actions to pump up those flat characters and make them more interesting. POV characters are the ones who are telling their story. They're driving the story, and we pick up their character just by the way that they think about and describe and look at the world around them. It tells us a lot about who they are. This is called deep POV, and it's something we'll cover in another video. Things get a lot trickier when you're never in the POV of the character that you're trying to characterize, but you still want them to feel distinct and memorable and real, as we say in the writing world, round and not flat. So think of a few of these non-POV characters that we all really love. None of these claim to be the point of view character of the story, yet we have a distinct feeling about each of them. They are unique. Some of these characters have a big role in the story, but what about characters that just show up in a scene or two of the book? Even these side characters that are just going to be in a scene or two deserve to be something that we can remember, something that gives us an emotional reaction, and characterization is the way to do it. This involves 2 tools. The first, description. Okay, that might seem obvious, but let's talk about how description can land on the page and really bump up your side characters. The point is to help us see your character. That means give us a visual representation, and this doesn't mean describing in one big info dump. We can point out characteristics that make these characters unique by pointing out their facial expressions, their body language, and pairing up the things that they do with the things that they say. Let's look at how Hagrid is described the very first time he shows up in Harry Potter, A Sorcerer's Stone. Long tangles of bushy black hair and a beard hid most of his face. He had hands the size of trash can lids, and his feet in their leather boots were like baby dolphins. Now, in this instance, the author has decided to describe him all at once in one paragraph, but it's a short paragraph, and look at the words she uses. Bushy black hair and beard that hides most of his face, hands the size of trash can lids, and leather boots like baby dolphins. This points to the voice that we see in all the Harry Potter books that make them so charming and fun to read. But you can see that she hasn't described Hagrid from head to toe. Instead, she's pointed out 3 characteristics that create a whole vision and picture of who Hagrid is. Also, it's important to note that this isn't the only time we get description of Hagrid. Throughout all of the books, it is constantly mentioned how large he is, how bushy his beard is, and as well as his character and his love for animals. That's the important thing, is consistency. Set it up soon, and then throughout the book, every time that character comes on the page, remind us of the characteristics that make them unique. Sherlock Holmes. This is a unique one because in these books, Watson is the point of view character. He's telling the story of all these mysteries and adventures the 2 of them go on. So this is the way that Watson describes his partner, Sherlock Holmes. Holmes was a man of habits, and I had become one of them, a comrade, upon whose nerve he could place some reliance, a whetstone for his mind. If I irritated him by a certain methodical slowness in my mentality, that irritation served only to make his own flame-like intuitions and impressions flash up the more vividly and swiftly. Such was my humble role in our alliance. Again, very early on, we've got a couple paragraphs dedicated just to setting up who this character is. What makes this interesting and unique is because it's how Watson sees Holmes. It also is Watson comparing his own intellect to his partners and how unique they are, as well as the relationship that they share. A great setup for this character. But let's look again at side characters. Usually with side characters, they're in the book for a very short amount of time, and that means we can't be dedicating entire paragraphs to who they are or what they're going to do. We very quickly need to indicate a visual representation of these characters so that they are memorable and they stick in our brains. In the book Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, we meet Stan. Stan has a very quick attitude. He's described as being about Harry's age, just a couple years older, and has pimples all over his face. And throughout the scene, he likes to be kind of a know-it-all. He's always surprised when Harry doesn't know stuff, and he seems to be kind of smug, rubbing that knowledge in Harry's face. Ernie is unique because he never actually says a word. He more just, and harums. So Stan is always talking to Ernie, but we get a sense of who Ernie is and how they speak to each other. Ernie is only described by an elderly wizard who has very thick glasses. That's it. So this is a great example of how only a few descriptors are needed to be able to put a visual representation of the character in your reader's head. Then throughout the scene, using dialogue and actions to continue and match up what they look like with who they are. Tool number 2, action. Not only do we need to describe our characters and side characters, but we also need to give them actions that are unique and show off who they are. Let's look at some specific examples of where that's done in writing. Anyone else a Harry Potter fan? J.K. Rowling does such a nice job of creating characters that don't need to be on the page for very long for us to get a very distinct impression of who they are. They are memorable, they are enjoyable, and they are unique. So let's look at Aunt Marge. We all remember is her being the aunt who blows up in Prisoner of Azkaban. But her character is very unique and important to the story as she puts Harry in her place and is another human that seems to look down on the wizarding world. We have a little bit of dialogue paired with actions, and those actions specifically point to who Aunt Marge is. "As I expected," said Aunt Marge, taking a huge swig of brandy and wiping her chin on her sleeve. Who takes a huge swig of brandy and then wipes her chin on her sleeve? You can see how these subtly but distinctly point to who Aunt Marge is. Maybe a bit of a drinker and a little bit sloppy. A little bit low class, even though she's looking down on Harry. Let's look at the second example. "No, Vernon," hiccuped Aunt Marge, holding up a hand, her tiny bloodshot eyes fixed on Harry's. Okay, so again, little tiny details that point to who she is, and paired with her dialogue. She's hiccuping, so she's had quite a few swigs of brandy, and tiny bloodshot eyes is a negative connotation that gives us an idea of how we should feel about Aunt Marge and who her character is. So let's review the 2 tips that you can apply today to bump up the characterization of all of your characters, especially those side ones, and make the flat ones feel a little more round. Number 1, give your readers something to visualize that reveals personality. This means description. This means showing. Give them something to see. Most importantly, pick out the little things that point to the most interesting and unique parts of what makes them who they are. Rule number 2, don't dump it all at once. Sprinkle it throughout the scene. We showed in our examples that a great way to sprinkle these things throughout the scene is to pair them with dialogue. As the characters act and move and especially speak, we can include those little tiny descriptions or little actions to continue to remind your reader who your characters are and that they are consistent throughout the scene. Thanks for joining me. Now go and apply those 2 tips and make your characters jump off the page and make them incredibly memorable to your readers. If you would like to hear more about the Manuscript Doctor, visit us at themanuscriptdoctor.com. And as always, subscribe to get more of our videos and quick tips that you can apply today.